We are back. We live. Hello, hello. Da-da-da-da. Da-da-da. Let me make sure, check everything's good. Boom. Am I live here? Hello, hello, hello. What's up, everyone? We're going over the Dolphins draft class today. Looking at what they're going to do at 13th overall. That's where the Dolphins end up picking. We're going to look at all the options. Guys that I think are likely to be picked. Obviously, this is pretty early in the process, so like things can change. Like guys will get bumped up that I think will be gone. We'll learn more, and then there'll be guys that maybe go down throughout the process, and maybe some new guys that we didn't think were possibilities will end up getting raised up. But yeah, we're gonna go over some different players' names today, guys, that I got listed here that we've seen, and it's a bunch of different positions too. And we'll just talk draft, the typical stuff. Well, and I'll start going through it once like more people get in here. Hopefully, boom. That. Let's see if that works. But it looks like we potentially, boom, opening some stuff up here. I was a little bit late to get going. Let people roll through. Looks like we got at least some. But yeah, just ask some questions, guys, you want to see. But we're going to go most of the first round, and we'll talk even some prospects tonight. Like I know Notre Dame plays Penn State tonight, and we're going to talk about some of those guys like Tyler Warren, who I just made a draft film breakdown on, if you haven't seen that yet. There's some other intriguing guys like Xavier Watts in the second round, Notre Dame safety. He's a guy I like to keep an eye on. But I think the first guy that we'll start with, someone that I've seen talked about throughout, from the Dolphins fans base. We've seen him in multiple mock drafts. I think he's a guy who could very well be there at 13th overall, and that is Malachi Starks from Georgia. Georgia safety. Safety is obviously a big need for the Dolphins. If you going into this offseason, I believe Patrick McMorris is the only safety under contract, which is kind of crazy. And we haven't seen any of him, so we don't really have any starters. I imagine they're probably going to move on from everyone. Holland is a free agent, and he's probably going to get paid, and he didn't even have a great season. And it was a big need regardless if those guys were returning or not, let's be honest. But Starks, listed at 6 foot, 185, so, maybe not the biggest guy weight-wise, could put on a little more to his frame, but the traits are all there. The athletic traits, he's a very, very good athlete, damn near elite. He's fluid with his hips, which is a big part of playing defensive back at the next level. Changes directions really well, explosive, body control, balance, all of those things. I really like the range. His ball skills, fantastic. He can make ball skills plays on the back end, but I don't have any first round QB grades, but I still believe about 5 will go. I don't know if 5 will go. I mean, it's possible. I haven't watched enough QBs to really know. I feel pretty good about 2 going before the Dolphins pick. I don't think 5 might go in the first round, but 5 will not go before the Dolphins pick. That would surprise me. But I think Ward and Shadur, potentially. You mentioned Dart. Dart could rise up, but I personally have Dart as a day 2 guy. I have Milrow not as a day 1 guy either. So, but QBs end up getting pushed up. We'll just see how desperate teams are. I just feel like in this draft class, it's very unpredictable right now because from what I've heard, people have very conflicting grades on players, which is interesting. But continuing on Malachi Starks, very good athlete and instinctive. He's a very smart football player. I feel like there was times this year, I saw him get beat or maybe, make some plays that he usually didn't miss in the past. So, there were some inconsistencies there. And he's a safety, so, sometimes safety send him to fall down on the draft board just because it's not the biggest impact position. But, safety is very important in Weaver's scheme. If you go look at Baltimore, when they have Kyle Hamilton out there, they're a different defense, and he's, what transformed them. And, yeah, like you said, Stark's an immediate impact player right away. And he's a guy that can play multiple different roles. He can play nickel for you if you really wanted to. If you wanted him to be your nickel on some reps, and then maybe you move Ramsey back to safety, or then Malachi Starks is back on safety on the back end. You have Ramsey in the slot. It just allows you for versatility, be able to disguise things, which is huge. He can come down. He has the good alignment versatility. He can play in the box and fit versus the run. Just a 3-level defender, playmaker, can match up on tight ends, slot receivers. That's such a big value, and gets turnovers. I would say, I believe he had an injury last year in 2023 from all I've seen, this is like the only injury I really saw from him was he had a shoulder injury that he played through in 2023, and in the offseason he had surgery on it. So this year he was playing, coming off a labrum that he needed repaired. So he's playing through an injury as well. So that's something that I think to keep note of. But I think one of the most well-rounded players. He's personally going to be a top 5 prospect for me. But the reason I think he has a chance to be there at 13 is because safety isn't a super high value position. Those guys end up falling, and I think there's a decent chance he'll be going around that range to where the Dolphins end up picking. And I really like Starks as a prospect. And he's been an impact player for, plays for Georgia. And Chris Greer is going to be the GM. Chris Greer always likes taking like the team from like the Power 5 schools. Like that's where he typically goes, and Georgia is one of those teams that he's definitely will take a look at. But I do like Starks a lot, and I think he's at a very big position in need. And I think outside of like trench players, I feel like Starks is like, guys who would make an impact in the whether it's O-line, D-line, or maybe even Tyler Warren, a guy who can impact the blocking part of the game. I feel like Starks is like the most likely pick outside of the trenches. I think it just depends. I think Ramsey could be moved around. It just depends like what you do in free agency in the draft. Like if you're in the position in the draft where like corner is best player available, say like Will Johnson falls to you or something, and you're like, oh, we should like Will Johnson, we have rated higher than everyone else here, so let's take him. That would give you the versatility to potentially move Ramsey to more of that like star nickel safety role, like where he can play, and he can still play outside corner. It just allows you to utilize his versatility more. So that's why I'm totally cool with still taking a corner, because you have these guys that can be moved around and fill other roles for you. If you don't end up taking a safety, Ramsey could be that. And I feel like that's kind of because Ramsey is getting older, and sometimes guys who are very good corners that also like played safety and have that versatility end up moving into more of that safety role later on in their careers. And Ramsey, like, he hasn't really played much safety in the NFL. Like, he played a lot of nickel and corner. But like, he was a very good safety at Florida State in college. Like, we know he has the ability to play that if it ever needed to. Will Greer continue to think Cam will be a salvageable player? Talking about Cam Smith? I think they're going to give Cam Smith, like, this will probably be Cam Smith's, like, last year to prove himself. I don't have a lot of, like, faith in it at this point, but I think they're going to give him that chance to at least compete. But I don't think they're going to, like, trust him going into the year. They're going to be like, okay, let's try to get some competition in there. But I imagine they're still going to have Ramsey. Kohu's a restricted free agent, so I imagine they're going to get Kohu back to compete. Kendall Fuller's still under contract. But I would still like to add to that corner room because I think they need like another starter to upgrade there. Or you could just really upgrade at safety, and then there's versatility, and maybe you can move people around. But Starks, I think one of the best options for Miami, I would say a safe pick, a high impact pick right away, and also still like down the line. Like, he's one of the guys like in this class. Like, I don't think this is a very strong class up front, and there's not many guys that I see like, oh, that guy has, like, he could be a good player, but then there's like guys like Starks where I'm like, oh, he could be good, but he could also be like an all-pro safety. Like, I see that potential with Starks, which I don't see that many. Yeah, and I do believe Weaver will remain as the D coordinator. I know he's getting some interviews, but usually, like, I think he would probably need another year or two before I think would see him getting hired. And I think Weaver would like some safety play, because safety play was so important in that Baltimore Ravens scheme. Will Texas cornerback Barron drop to the second? I have a first-round grade on Barron. I think it's possible he drops to the second, but I just feel like throughout this whole draft process, he's going to keep rising and rising. And I actually have him as like a sleeper potential pick, even for Miami, if that's where he ended up rising to. But I think he'll go first round, just because it's not that most... there's not that many first-round players overall. But yeah, we can now talk about some other players that... like Malachi Starks, but not at 13. I mean, that's fair. I just like Starks a lot as a player. I just think he's a top 5 player in this class. And I know safety is not necessarily the biggest, premium position to take in the first round, but I think at 13 it's pretty good value for what I think Starks is. Let's see. Who should I talk about next? I have some Starks is one of the main targets. This isn't in any order, by the way. Like, I'll probably figure out an order once we get closer to the draft time of like how I would draft them. But another player we will talk about. Let's go to the O-line. Let's go Kelvin Banks. Because I think Banks is one that is more likely to be gone just because O-line, and some teams will see him as a tackle, some teams will see him as a guard. He'll be playing in a couple of days, so definitely keep an eye on him. Left tackle for Texas. I personally think if the Dolphins were to draft him, he would play guard for them, at least initially. Maybe tackle down the line. But I like him overall. I think he's a good enough athlete, plays with some good toughness. Overall, he does a lot of things that, similarly to like the Texas offense, does a lot of things similarly with their O-line, with like their play action, their RPOs, and like they do a lot of like quick jump setting. So like he doesn't go in a lot of like true one-on-one pass sets a lot, which the Dolphins do not. They don't do that either. So like he's used to that. He can create some movement in the running game. Athletically, I think he's got good feet to mirror and match. He's got a strong outside hand. It's really tough to beat him around the corner. He makes picking up stunts look very easy. Like he plays very under controlled. There are times like I think he can play, like I think he can work on his balance, and I wish he played with a little more flexibility. That's what holds me back from him being like a top player. And the reason I think he'll be gone though is just because teams are desperate for O-line help, and someone I think in the top 10 is going to take at least one of these O-linemen, probably both. I think Banks and Campbell. But there is a chance they could drop there. I really like his work on double teams. He tacks the low hips, climbs to the next level, which is big. He's got that movement ability. I do need to see a little bit more film on him because I think there's some flexibility issues at time that I want to, figure that kind of thing out. But overall, I think Banks would be another like good, especially at 13. Because this whole draft class is tough because there's not a lot of picks where it's like I don't have 10 players ranked as like normal top 10 players, So like some of the guys that are going to go in top 10 are guys I wouldn't typically think should go top 10, but that's just the nature of this draft class. Yeah, but if Banks was there, I think you got to take him. But because I would probably have Banks usually graded around as like in the 15 to 20 range, but in this draft class, I think he goes top 10. And he would be very high because you could play him at guard right away, and he would slide in right at left guard for you, fix a lot of problems. You obviously don't need him at tackle because you would probably have Patrick Paul play left tackle, you'd Austin Jackson on right tackle. Banks has like the size, I think, to still play on the interior, and I think maybe some of the problems, because I don't think he has the greatest length either. Some of the problems he would have at tackle, I think he could even hide those problems at guard. But let's see. Okay. I don't want a blue chip player if one falls to 13. I don't care the position. I agree, Scotty. That's kind of what I'm always about, taking the best player available. Now, if you have guys that are closely rated, then I would maybe lean towards the guy that's more position value for you. But like, if it's clear, like you have this safety who's much better than this edge defender, I would take the safety, or, vice versa, whatever. Free agency will shape the direction of our draft. Yeah, for sure. Banks will go top 7. I think that's pretty likely, but I don't think it's a guarantee. So much can change, especially. Is Warren a first round grade? For me, yes. He's the only tight end I have a first round grade on. I don't have that many. I only have I think 13 or 14 first round grades. Warren is one of them for me. Can we just draft a backup QB with a 13th? Jalen Milroe, Drew Aller. I mean, Cameron having an athletic who can make throws and big strong speed. I would not draft a backup quarterback at 13. I think the Dolphins have too many needs. I would only take a quarterback at 13 if you thought this is the future of your franchise. And I just personally in this class don't see that. One, I think Aller is going to return to school. You said Milroe. I don't really like Milroe, so personally I would not do that. Yeah, Jonah Seven, Arizona State guy, or Arizona guy, not Arizona State. He played tackle. I like him as a potential guard fit, but more day two guy. But mostly just trying to focus on these first round guys for now. But that's why like these tackle guys that we're talking about, I think if Banks and Campbell are gone, I wouldn't even really consider O-line at 13. Other than maybe one other player that we'll talk about in a sec, but I think those two guys are most likely gone just because it's the nature of how the draft works in the positions. Even though I think they're probably better value at 13 than where teams would take them. It's just you don't want to reach just because O-line's a huge position of need. That's why I think free agency is very important for the O-line. You got to get at least one guard that's for sure like a starter. And there's some guys there that I've seen like obviously Trace Smith is like the big one. I know Will Fries from Colts is actually not a bad option. And then there's some day 2 guys too. I love Milam. Yeah, I like Milam in the second. But yeah, that's kind of where I feel about Starks, Banks, both guys that I think could be main targets. Luther Burden, if we trade Tyreek. You know what? I might as well talk about Luther Burden because he's another guy that I've listed on this list. I was going to talk about him later, but we can talk about Burden. I like Burden as a player. If you were to trade Tyreek, I think receiver is definitely on the table. I think Tet McMillan most likely gone, so I'm not going to talk about him. But I think Burden and Emeka Egbuka are both guys the Dolphins will really like. And they're both, I think, kind of probably players who should go around the range the Dolphins are going to pick. They could go a little bit later, could go even a little bit before, and I wouldn't be surprised. But going with Burden, where's Burden? Okay, I have my notes on him. Burden is a guy that he's the yak guy in this class. Amazing with the ball in his hands. He wasn't as productive this year for Missouri. He was much better last year in 2023. But amazing with the ball in his hands. Just such a very smooth, good feel, elusive, very versatile guy. So like he's a guy that you just get the ball. Like he lines up at running back. You give him jet sweeps. You throw these swing passes to him. He plays almost like a Debo type role, but he's a little bit different, like body type wise. I think, obviously he's good left to right, runs with some good pace without his routes. I think he can still develop as a receiver overall. Like, I don't think Burden would be my top option. Like, I don't love Burden. I would say I like him. Like, if he was their pick, and if they traded Tyreek away, I'd be like, I would be cool with it, but it wouldn't be like my main go-to, I don't think. But he's got great tracking ability, good down the field. Like, that's where I think he's great at. His yak ability and then, like, tracking down the field. I think he can still develop as a route runner. Can play too high, and want more of a blocker. I could see the Dolphins like really loving Egbuka though, the Ohio State kid. Like he feels like just like the Dolphins type of receiver. Very savvy, very smart, ends up in the right spots. He can play inside, outside. He's a very good blocker. Fits right into the scheme, and he's another guy that I think will probably go mid first round too. So, yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Burden. Like Higgins, wide receiver, Ohio State later in draft. Yeah, I think Higgins is like a probably around 3 guy for me. But yeah, he would be a nice. He's a good player, especially at his size. Like I think he runs some good routes at his size. Let's see, but that's kind of where I feel about Burden. He would not be my top option, but that wouldn't be a bad pick at 13. Especially if you moved on from Tyreek. What position is most pressing for you at 13th overall? It's tough. I would say this is probably a question better to answer after free agency because it's going to change. I would have to predict what they're doing through free agency. But since we're pre-free agency, I'll give the pick. I mean, obviously, I would say interior O-line first. But I don't love the options of interior O-line at 13. So, like, it's not like you need to force that. I think interior O-line, D-line, because a lot of those guys will be free agents, and then wide tight end, like a Tyler Warren or safety, because those are like your biggest needs right now. But we'll see how it changes. I don't want to add another small receiver. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say like Burden or Egbuka are they're not big guys, but they're not like super small guys either. They're like more your average size receivers. Yeah, I would say this draft, just to give you an overview, there's not like most scouts, and from what I've seen, from what I've heard, what people have talked about, have around like 15 first round grades, which is on the lower end compared to usual. Usually they have about like 21-ish first round grades. So there's not as many first round players, but I do think day 2 has a lot of like pretty even across the board, like second to third round players. Like there's some nice depth there, and a lot of those guys are like pretty even with each other. So it's more of a strong day 2. maybe early day 3 class than it is as like a top of the end class. I think once the Dolphins are picking, a lot of the first round grades will be gone. Like you'll probably only have like a couple first round graded players left on the board. Burden is 5'11", that's small. I wouldn't say it's that small. It's like it's the threshold like right before being like I would say it's like slightly below average. To me, I've always said this, I think 5'11", 6 foot, 6'1", like the 5'11" to 6'1" range is like the perfect height for receiver. Once you go below that, you're like too small and you're like forced to play in the slot. And then once you go above that, those guys typically lose a lot of their like, they're not as athletic and explosive. Like you have to be like really dominant to play as like a lot of those like big receivers end up being bust. There's only a handful of them that end up being good. So like I don't mind those guys that are in the 5'11", 6 foot, 6'1" range. Those where like a lot of the studs end up coming from. Yeah, I like Jalen Royals from Utah State. At this point, I want to draft a real guard. Well, I mean, a lot of these tackles I think are real guards. Like they're more guards than they are tackles. Like they played tackle in college, but I think a lot of this class, like they're definitely more guards than they are tackles. Like if you want a true guard, you're probably thinking Tyler Booker from Alabama. He's a guy that I think is possible at 13. I would think it would be a little bit of a reach. But he is a true guard. Like that guy is huge, powerful, very good at like picking up stunts and stuff like that. He's not an elite athlete or anything. I would like for him to be a little more athletic to fit in the Dolphins system, but it wouldn't surprise me if they just were like, hey, we just need to get big and powerful up front. And that's where they wanted to go. He displaces people in the running game. He's a smart player. I think he has enough athleticism to still be like good. I just think it would be like a slight reach because I think he's more of like a late first rounder is where he should go in this draft class at least. Have you heard anything about maturity issues with Deion Walker from UK? I mean, I've definitely heard people talk about it. Like there's some people who I've listened to who also do some like streams on YouTube and stuff like that. That have talked about those types of things that they've heard. Same thing with Luther Burden too. Apparently some people have heard, it's not like major concerns, but there's like it's like something to notice with them. Trade back then take Tyler Booker. It's definitely a possibility. I think the only thing about like trading back is like it takes 2 to tango. So like there has to be someone willing to trade up, which at 13, it's a possibility because I think if some team's like, hey, there's not many first round players left and they're like, we want one of our first round graded guys. And then the team from say like 18 or 19 trades up to 13 to get one of those guys. That makes it a possibility, but you can't like rely on that type of thing. But let's see who's next. Let's talk about Tyler Warren, Penn State tight end. I just made a film breakdown on him. If you guys haven't seen that, check it out. My favorite tight end in the class, first round graded. Just an all around stud, man. Dolphins need a wide tight end badly. I think this is something that would be much of an impact as like, honestly, I think even more impactful than taking some of the guards that people will talk about. I think you get like a guard in free agency. Because like in free agency, you're not going to get a wide tight end that will make this impact like Tyler Warren could. In free agency, I think you could get a guard that would make an impact like taking a guard in the first round. So if you can get some guards in free agency that can fill that need and you go Tyler Warren in the first round, because one of the biggest problems with the Dolphins run game was this season was how bad the tight ends were at blocking. And Tyler Warren can play as a wide tight end attached to the formation. He can work on outside zone. He plays very physical. He's got great size. He's like 6'6", 260, I believe. And he's more than that too. He's not just a blocker that can bully you. He's great. Like they line him up at wildcat quarterback and give him direct snaps. Like he's great with the ball in his hands. Very physical. He's dominant at the catch point. He's one of my favorite options personally at 13. I think he would be an immediate impact player in multiple different ways. And you can't really find a player like that at that position in free agency. That's why I'm kind of predicting it now, just because I know once free agency plays out, that's not going to change in my mind. Like O-line could change in my mind if they figured out that position in free agency. But yeah, he's very tough, and he's like a culture change. Like Dolphins have had a problem with their toughness. This guy is physical, tough as it gets. He's versatile. He plays in multiple different spots. He can be play as a big slot for you if you need it. He can play in line. He can play. I've seen him play move tight end and line up as a fullback. I've seen him take wildcat snaps. He's just a natural feel for things. Like he can get open with his route running if needed. If he doesn't get open, he can win at the catch point with some insane contested catch. If he has a good feel for space, in both with blocking and receiving. So to me, one of the guys I'm going to have very highly graded and would love at 13. Warren for a QB sneak. Yeah, I mean, he runs QB sneaks for them. I would not take a tight end at 13. But, like, would you have not taken Brock Bowers at... When did the Raiders take Brock Bowers last year? And Brock Bowers is... I would say... And I'll say this. Brock Bowers, I would have rated higher than Tyler Warren. Brock Bowers was the best tight end prospect I've ever seen. And he's... should win Offensive Rookie of the Year. He won't because he's a tight end. But he was the best rookie, in my opinion, in the NFL this year. Like, both sides of the ball. And you can make some big impacts. A lot of the best... and this isn't just about, like, oh, it's a tight end that can catch the ball. He's a guy that's going to make an impact in the running game, which is, like, I think where the Dolphins need to upgrade the most. And, like, he would make just as much of an impact, I think, as a good run blocking guard would in that situation. Because the Dolphins run so much outside zone. And they, like, think about how many runs were blown up this season because Julian Hill or Durham Smythe missed a block. We got bigger needs at tight end. See, I don't think we do. I think wide tight end is like a top 3 need for the Dolphins. Jonnu is a great player, and I love Jonnu and exactly what he brought, but he's not playing the same position that I'm talking about. The fish push. Yeah, tight end is, like, think about the impact George Kittle has, because we're thinking in the Dolphins system, right? George Kittle has a much bigger impact in the Niners system than any of their guards do. Like, with their running game, their passing game, he affects it all. I think that's the type of player you could get out of, like, a Tyler Warren. And no, I'm not saying you definitely need to take Warren, because this is a good tight end class. If you don't take Warren at 13, like, you can get a tight end that can make an impact in the second, like a Gunnar Helm or a Mason Taylor, that are also some good fits. Or some guys later on, like Jackson Hawes is a good blocker. He wouldn't give you the receiving impact, but he could be a blocker for you. I just think, can't dismiss. In this class specifically, I would understand being, like, in the past, being, like, a little hesitant on, like, a tight end or a safety. But I think in this class, if you're picking at 13, there's a very decent chance the best player on your board would be either Tyler Warren or Malachi Starks. And maybe you wouldn't take them, but if they're clearly your best guy, then I think that's where the Dolphins should go, Yeah. Yeah, well, I think the thing with Jonnu is people think tight end's not a need for the Dolphins because Jonnu's here. Jonnu doesn't really play tight end. He's like a big slot. He's a receiver for the Dolphins. He doesn't line up in line and he doesn't block for you. I love what Jonnu brings to the team. He's a very valuable player, but I don't think people should be thinking of him as a tight end because that's not really what he does. I think receivers like Jawan Jennings, I've talked about it. I like Jack Besh, more of a middle round guy. If you want to go receiver, someone like that. There's some big body receivers that I think you get in, like, the middle rounds in this draft that can play with physicality. So yeah. But yeah, one of my favorite options. Those are another guys. We can talk about Will Campbell next. Will Campbell is the other offensive lineman that I think the Dolphins would definitely be considered pretty heavily if he was there at 13. I think he could be gone, probably just because I've talked about O-line is such a big need for a lot of teams. He probably will be gone. But yeah, Will Campbell, LSU tackle. He's another guy that plays tackle for LSU, but he has shorter length arms and probably could, I think for the Dolphins system, would be better at guard. I think, like I talked about with Banks, I think Banks and Campbell can play both tackle and guard at the next level. I think it just depends on what team they go to. But both would be guards for the Dolphins, at least early on. I love the nastiness he plays with. Like, he torques people and he tosses them out of the club a lot. Um, plays with like overall pretty good technique. Can get over the top. I think when he tries to make up for the limited length, but that's not as much of a problem on the inside. Good feet to mirror and match. Really active with his hands. Like he has heavy hands to instantly stop people. Plays with some light feet. Very naturally strong prospect, and I've heard him talk too. He seems like a very smart guy that plays with like a lot of physicality. He's a guy that could definitely help transform some of that, maybe the toughness stuff that people talk about it being a problem. But overall, I would say he's definitely an above average athlete. Plays with physical toughness, good anchor, can create some movement, displacement at the point of attack. Has that size and length that I was talking about. Wait, what's his size and length? He's listed at 6'6", 320, so he's got good size to him. I don't think he has we'll see what his arm length ends up being, because I think that because it doesn't look that long on the film. We'll see once he's listed out, but just playing with maybe more consistent technique overall in pass protection. But if you move to guard, that would be an easier way to hide it. And for the Dolphins specifically, we talk about the Dolphins, that might be a problem for other teams, but with the Dolphins, you're doing a lot of jump setting. You're not doing a lot of these true one-on-one pass sets in McDaniel's scheme. So that's not something that's a huge concern for me. I just want guys who are physical, are going to dominate, run at the point of attack, and create a different temperament up front. That's what I would be looking for. And I think Banks and Campbell are guys that can give you that. They might have their weaknesses, but I think those weaknesses could be easily hidden within the Dolphins scheme. I think a lot of O-linemen actually coming to the Dolphins, if you have problems with some pass protection or maybe technique sometimes, look at Austin Jackson, look at Patrick Paul. Those guys had some clear technique problems in college, and going to the Dolphins is such a good way to help you hide that, just because they don't ask you to be in those situations very often. So, I mean, if you're an O-lineman, you probably want to end up in Miami if you have those issues. But yeah. Oh, okay. Let me see. So you think Jonnu is a slightly better blocking Gesicki? No, I don't think the reason Gesicki didn't work out is Gesicki is a long-bodied, no ability after the catch type of player. What the Dolphins needed from a big slot tight end, they're very different players, actually. I know they're both not blockers, but Jonnu's a compact player that you can use in the intermediate part. Gesicki's more of a field stretching seam tight end, and that's not really what the Dolphins needed from that position. I don't like Savin. Yeah, Jonah from Arizona, we'll call him. Yeah, I mean, he's not. I've seen a lot of people really like him. He's not my favorite. I would literally, if he was round 3, I would be down for sure. Round 2, it wouldn't be the worst pick, but it wouldn't be my favorite pick. Do you think we could get a first rounder for Waddle? He epitomizes the softness of McDaniel's softness. I think you could get a first rounder for Waddle, but I don't agree with the softness thing. I think Waddle, he's on the smaller side, but I don't think that just because you're smaller makes you soft. I think it would be a mistake to move on from Waddle. Rucci, you guys are talking about Rucci and Hill. Personally, I think you just need much better tight end play. I wouldn't rely on either of them. If either of them are on your team, they need to be your third or fourth tight end at best. Yeah, I'll give you, Fabi, I'll give you a quick recap. The players we talked about so far are Malachi Starks, Georgia safety. Big fan of him. Very athletic, very smart player. I think be with immediate impact. And I would say a top 5 player in this class that could drop to 13 because the position he plays. Tyler Warren, we just talked about, Penn State tight end, great fit. I think he would change and make a lot more of an impact than people would think, because wide tight end is a bigger need than some people realize. Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks, the 2 tackles, one from LSU, one from Texas. I think both would play guard for the Dolphins. Both have the physical temperament, I think enough size. They would be able to create some movement, work on double teams. It would help the running game out for sure right away. Who else we talked about? We talked about Luther Burden, receiver from Missouri, run after catch guy. Wouldn't be my favorite pick at 13, but he's a guy to at least know the name of. I think that's kind of it right now. Him especially as Will Howard, Ohio State quarterback. I haven't really watched him this year, so I don't really have a take on him. I'm gonna watch more quarterbacks as time goes. I also want players that don't have an injury history. Well, out of the players we talked about, I don't think many of them have. Malachi Starks had a shoulder injury. That was the only thing I saw on him. Like most players are gonna have some kind of small injuries. I don't think Tyler Warren had a single thing, the Penn State tight end injury that I could find. Some of the other guys are gonna have injury. Most players are gonna have some sort of injury history. You know, like it's very rare to find someone that doesn't have anything. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, guys, I know I've seen people be down on Waddle. You have to understand like situation and like how things play out are so important. I know talent wise, and I know who Waddle is, and from what I've seen from him from college and his NFL career, we've seen when his rookie year they used him like he was Jarvis Landry, and then he broke the rookie reception record at the time. And then the next when McDaniel came in, he led the league in yards per reception. Now with how teams are playing them, they've had to adjust. But I think if the Dolphins moved on from Tyreek Hill and Waddle was your top option, and you actually like used him as your top option, he would be seen as one of the better receivers in the league, and the whole perception of him would change. Again, just because I feel like people flip flop a lot with their opinions on players. Like Jalen Waddle is still a very very talented and good player, and not one I would move off from. I would just like to complement his skill set with like another receiver that's like a different type of player. Yeah, but I think you're more likely to move on from Tyreek. So then Waddle would take on the Tyreek role, and then you would pair him with like that more bigger, more physical receiver. That's what I would agree with that. But I don't. Waddle's still young too. Like how old is Jalen Waddle? He's got to be like 25, right? Something like that. You just signed him to like a contract extension. He's 26. Yeah, 26. He turned 26 in November, so he's still like young player. I don't know. And Waddle, I mean, he beats man coverage in a way consistently. I mean, he beat man coverage more than Tyreek did last year. He was our best guy versus man, and he beats press coverage in a way that no other receiver does, like on a consistent level. Like when he has an out-breaking route, he will take an inside release and still win to the outside, and like other receivers don't do that. Like they maybe do it once in a blue moon. It's something Waddle does every game. Like, I don't know. I think Waddle is super special. Like there's a lot of guys on the team that like, I think you need to upgrade and move on from. Waddle ain't one of them. Are there any cornerbacks worthy of this pick 13? Yes. I was about to talk about corners. Obviously there's Travis Hunter, who I'm not going to talk about because he will be gone. If he was there at 13, you run to the podium, play him a receiver, corner, who cares? He's the best player in this draft. Then there's other corners that are going to be talked about. Will Johnson from Michigan. He's a guy that will probably, I've seen in most mock drafts, he's gone before 13. Seems like scouts are very high on him. He's a guy that if he was there at 13, you definitely are considering him. Good size, good athletic profile, very instinctive player, especially in zone. Like he had a lot of pick sixes, like he breaks on stuff. He's very intelligent, jumps a lot of things. I think there's times in like press man, he gets into trouble. I want to see what he runs at the combine. I think that will be very important for him. But I think he's got great fluidity for his size. Like he's got some elite understanding of like positioning and leverage, and he plays great from like off man. Like his click and close is really good. If he was there, he's definitely a player you have to consider. Just I'm not saying corner is the biggest need for the Dolphins, but like as I talked about, like I'm a best player available person, and you could always potentially move Ramsey to more of that nickel safety role that I was talking about. There's some other corners, like I think Siobhan Ravel. People, I'm going to say this. He tore his ACL, so he's an injured player, but he was, I think, a first-round pick based on his film. I don't think the Dolphins will take him at 13, but he's a very good player. Benjamin Morrison, another injured player, probably not going to be probably will be not be taken by them. But there's some good corners that are. I think they're more like trade back options. But Will Johnson, if he was there, for sure. But I like Johnson a lot. What else we got? I think Banks and Campbell's go top 10, but if one of them falls, grab them. Yeah, I think they probably both go top 10. But I think you have to at least add one like starter level guard in free agency for sure. So you don't need to force yourself to draft a guard in the first round. You got to get at least one in free agency, and then have like another guy that's at least that could fight for the other guard spot, and then you maybe take a guard on day 2 if you don't, so you don't have to force one on day 1. What do you think of Gadsden as a day 2 pick? I think he's more of a day 3 guy. I think this tight end class is too good, and Gadsden is more of like a seam threat down the field pushing tight end, and I don't think that's exactly what the Dolphins need. I think they more need like a wide tight end, like a Tyler Warren, a Gunnar Helm, a Mason Taylor, and then some later round guys like Terrence Ferguson, Jackson Hawes. The tight end class is good though. I do like Gadsden as a player. I just don't know for Miami he's the best option. Let's see. No more injured players. Yeah, I was just throwing their names out there because you got to at least consider them. AJ was horrible at right guard. Yeah, to me, Jackson is a right tackle. I would just leave him there. I wouldn't risk it. Would you draft Josh Simmons even with the injury? Personally, not at 13. I think Josh Simmons might have the best tackle film I've seen, but I think the difference between Banks and Campbell is I think they can play guard for you and be better, maybe better guards than they are tackles. I think Simmons is a left tackle like only type of player. Are we still going to offer Javon Holland a contract? I don't think so. I mean, it's possible, but I'm going to guess no. I mean, they might offer him a small contract that he won't take. Yeah, Dolphins have some nice weapons to work with, but there's like they need a wide tight end and they need a bigger body receiver in the mix, and then they kind of have the rest taken care of. They got the Waddle. You talked about Washington and Jonnu, Jalen Wright, Devon Achane, maybe a bigger body back too to add to the mix, but you don't need to add like high draft capital to that. You can find probably that guy later in the draft, but yeah. I also would not mind drafting QB in round 3. Yeah, round 3 would be the earliest for me. I don't think I would do round 1 or 2 for QB. Unless like one of the round 2 guys, maybe one of the guys you really liked at QB fell in round 2 to you, I'd consider it, but I just don't love the QB class. I would wait till next year. I would get I would get probably the best veteran you could find for your system. And then I think this year is like the last year for like this group to prove it. 2025 is like their last year to prove it. Like Tua's got to stay healthy. And I think they got to get a playoff win for like Tua, McDaniel, Greer to like really give themselves another chance, because, NFL, you only get so much time. Holland is another player. Yeah. I can agree more with the Holland thing. Yeah. What about drafting the receiver from Ohio State at 13? I like Emeka Egbuka a lot. I put him down as a sleep. I have it listed down as I had main targets. And I had some sleeper targets that I think by the time the draft actually comes, these players will be considered like around that area. And I think Emeka Egbuka, the Ohio State receiver, is one of them. And I think the Dolphins will love him. Like Emeka Egbuka gives me like Amon-Ra St. Brown vibes. Can play inside, outside, very smart, understands how to get open. He likes to block too. He plays a lot of physicality. And what's Egbuka's side? I feel like Egbuka's a pretty like, he's a pretty like normal sized receiver. Nothing like, he's not super small, but he's not super big. Let me see. I think he's listed at like, he's listed at 6'1", 205. So I'm guessing to me, he looks more about 6 foot 200, which I think is like a pretty good. I think 6 foot 200 is like the ideal size for receivers because it allows them not to be too big to where like those guys, a lot of them aren't the best athletes. I mean, you find freak of natures every once in a while, and then they're not too small where like they're just limited to the slot. I really like Egbuka, and I think he's a sleeper option at 13 that, especially if you move on from Tyreek. But yeah. Okay, let me see. Joshua. Other names are Williams. I'm guessing you're talking about Cameron Ratledge. I'm watching Ratledge tonight. Gray Zabel. I like Zabel on day 2. He's one of my favorite options on day 2 for the Dolphins. Plays for North Dakota State at tackle, but he will be a guard at the NFL level. Athletic, definitely a guy I like. I like a lot of the day 2 options at O-line. I like Wyatt Millum. I like Zabel. I like Marcus Bow. I like Armand Membao as well, the guy from Missouri. I like Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. There's some solid day 2 options that are going to be there that I think you can get like a solid level starter. And I think it would be a better draft strategy that if like Banks and Campbell are gone, to not reach for one of the O-linemen at 13, take someone else that's like a stud, and then take like an O-lineman at where do the Dolphins pick on day 2, like 48, and then pair that with like whoever you signed in free agency. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the thing though, is if Campbell and Banks are gone, there's not a guy worth the pick at 13, in my opinion, at O-line. So like that's why I'm not like trying to reach. You don't reach for need, in my opinion. To me, you go this. So BPA over everything. And then if you have guys graded very closely, like they're close enough, like you make a stack, right? You stack your players up and you're like, okay, we have this guy slightly graded more, but for our system, our team, we're going to put this one slightly above just because it's a bigger need for us. But like if it's like clear that you have this safety over this offensive lineman, then you take the safety, that type of thing. Millum is best fit for us of that group, in my opinion. To play guard, I like Millum a lot. I don't know if he's the best fit because I think the other guys are better athletes, and I think the Dolphins might value athleticism. But I think Millum can play with a nice temperament. I do have, where are my notes? I have a whole scouting report on Millum actually that I did for this one job. I like Millum, day 2 guy. Warren in the first, Watts in the second, Scatabo and Betch in the third, Gabriel in the fourth. I like all the guys you named, Elwood, but I do think you need to grab an offensive line probably in there instead of like a Scatabo. I love Warren and I love Xavier Watts. If those were your first 2 picks, and then you say you took care of O-line in free agency, I would love that if you were able to get, because I think Warren and Watts would be great value at those spots. Watts is a stud. Watch both of those guys tonight. As I was saying, Penn State plays Notre Dame tonight, so both of those guys will be on. Xavier Watts, free safety for them. I think he has like 6 interceptions. He's like the ideal second round pick. That's not one of the O linemen that I'm talked about. So yeah, I really like him. Second or third round Michigan D tackle Kenneth Grant. From what I've heard, AB. From what I've heard and seen, it looks like Kenneth Grant is going to go like round 1. Yeah, well, I don't think T-Mac is going to be there. And honestly, like, I think T-Mac's a top 10 player in this class, but I just don't love him. I don't know what it is. I guess I'm just like, they've never been like, the super tall big receivers have never been like my favorites. A lot of them don't work out at the next level. Some do, obviously, like the Mike Evans and the DK Metcalfs of the world have worked out. But a lot of those guys end up being busts. I think McMillan would be good. But I would like more of like I want a bigger receiver, but I want them to be a little like, I feel like McMillan's a little on the leaner side for how tall he is, you know? I want someone who's going to go out there and like bully someone, run people over. Trying to read what you guys said. Yeah, in this class, I think Grant goes first round just because I have Grant listed here. I have Grant listed in one of the, I was literally going to talk about him as one of the options, even at 13. Like, because I think the best D tackle is Mason Graham. I think Graham's going to be gone, so I'm not going to talk about him. I think all the other D linemen are guys who should go later in the first round or second round. But I think if they're going to take one at 13, I think it would be Grant. Like, he's an intriguing trades player. D tackle is a position. Like, it depends who you re-sign or not. Like, this is one position that I think could potentially be fixed in free agency and you don't have to worry about in the early parts of the draft. But with what you have right now, Steeler's really the only guy on the roster. Huge, big player, intriguing trades player. He can move really well for his size. He can get down the field like laterally. I've seen him, he even chase someone down 20 yards down the field. Sometimes I think he'd be a little hit or miss. Like, he'd be a little inconsistent, late off the ball. But when he has a good feel for the play, man, like, he has some really dominant reps versus the run specifically. Like, some nice suddenness to gap exchange, some arm over. I just think the only reason I'm not like super on, like, it would be my top option. It would be a pick that I liked, but not my top option, is because I would want someone a little more impactful as a pass rusher. And I think Grant would have to develop in that area. Why is Stark ahead of Watts? I think Stark offers, I think they're both very good players, and I think Watts and Starks both are very smart. I think Starks is just a higher end athlete and can give you more work as like if you needed someone that could play nickel or matchup in the slot, I think Starks is someone that could be like very good at that at the next level. While Watts is maybe someone who would be better on the back end, like back end free safety type for you. I think teams just value that versatility Starks would have to like be a man cover guy more than what they'd have for Watts. But I think I'm going to have Watts as safety too. It depends. Also, I have Jahdae Barron, a guy I haven't talked about yet today, the Texas corner. He plays everywhere. That's a guy I love. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up flying up the draft board. He's another name to even keep in mind. I love him. Mr. Versatile. I've seen him play everywhere. Outside corner, both sides of the field, field and boundary. I've seen him play nickel. I've seen him play safety. I've seen him play linebacker. Probably that's like one of my guys in this class. Like Jahdae Barron, Xavier Watts. I love both of them. I like the other Texas safety that they have, Andrew Mukuba, as well. Just great anticipation, great feel. I think he's probably going to be a nickel at the next level. If you somehow came away in this draft with Jahdae Barron, I'm not mad about that. Okay, let's see. Do you go quarterback in the second or third? I think it's something you consider, but like I don't think you have to necessarily go quarterback in either of those rounds. I think it's something you consider because you're trying to upgrade at the backup position and maybe take some potential guys that you maybe think could even be your franchise down the line. But I don't know. I would probably wait until day 3, and then if you really need quarterback, then you go to 2026, where I think the class is going to be much better at the quarterback position. Graham is better than Grant? From Michigan? Yeah. Graham is the top D tackle in this class. He's going to go top 5, top 10. He's just the more explosive, disruptive player on a consistent basis than Grant. But yeah. Graham's insane, man. He'll be gone, though. Let's see. Who have I not talked about? Because those are a lot of the players that I think are very possible. Any other players that I think are possible? Okay, here's one that like I think is possible. There's some more names that I think are possible, but I probably wouldn't go in that direction at 13. But I got to mention them just because I think the Dolphins will be interested, and things will change. We're gonna have players shoot up draft boards that we haven't even talked about, and we'll have some players fall down draft boards just because this happens every draft cycle. But I think Jalen Walker, Georgia linebacker, he's like an edge outside linebacker, can give you off-ball reps, like versatile guy. He's a tweener. He's tough to like know exactly where to put him, but I feel like he feels like a Chris Greer guy to me. He feels like someone Greer would like, and I feel like someone like I could see Anthony Weaver liking his versatility and usage for. Where do I have him? Goddamn. Oh yeah, he's right here. Okay. I was like, where the heck is Jalen Walker? I was trying to find my notes. But yeah, plays both spots for Georgia. As I said, he plays off-ball linebacker, edge. They use him on like different blitzes and stuff like that. I think he does a better job like blitz as like an edge blitzer guy when he can play downhill. I don't think he has the instincts to play as like a true off-ball linebacker, to play as like a Mike or a Will on like run downs type of thing. But that guy plays very physically, very powerful downhill player. He will try to run through you. He has some really good reps versus the run. Very athletic. Can definitely use some development. I wouldn't be surprised if he's gone even before the Dolphins picked at 13. But he wouldn't be my favorite pick personally. But I could see the Dolphins really liking him. Same with like Shamar Stewart, Texas A&M edge. I could see the Dolphins really liking him as well. But this is another name to mention there. Hopefully we pick up a free agent lineman before the draft. They will. They'll definitely sign free agents before the draft. If they don't sign at least somebody like it. I'm not saying it has to be like a high end offensive lineman, but they're gonna at least sign one that's like potential starter. They have to. They would be crazy not to. Over Barrett Carter? Are you talking about Walker, who I was just talking about? Yeah, teams are going to have Walker over Carter for sure. I like Carter though, but Carter's going to go on day 2. Walker's going to go somewhere in round 1. Even though Walker's not my favorite. Malachi Starks to replace Holland? Definitely a high possibility. Starks, I'll say this. I think, so out of all the players we've talked about, I mentioned pretty much everyone I wanted to. Now, I think my favorite picks, as of right now, this can change, and I'll probably find some more people that I'll put in this conversation, or things might change. But I think Malachi Starks, Tyler Warren, and then the 2 offensive linemen, Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks. I think those 4 would be like the best sort of picks for the Dolphins as of right now that I've seen so far. Like realistic, because obviously there's some other players that I would rank ahead of them. Like I have Travis Hunter ranked very high. Mason Graham, Abdul Carter, the Penn State edge. I just think those guys are for sure going to be gone. But those are like the 4 guys that I'm kind of looking at. Who is Trey Smith? He's the guard from Kansas City. He's probably going to get paid a lot of money. He's probably the top free agent guard. There are some free agent guards to sign though that I've seen. I think I had some on my phone here. Let me see. I know Will Fries from Indianapolis is not a bad option if you want to get someone that's not going to be super expensive, but that could be like a solid starter for you. James Daniels, the Steeler guard. I know people wanted to trade for him in the offseason. He's a free agent. He would be a solid scheme fit. And I don't think the Steelers need to re-sign him because they drafted a lot of offensive linemen. Okay, sorry. Do you think Josh Simmons or Josh Connerly are available to us? I think they'll both be there. But I think for those guys, to me, the reason I prefer the other ones, one is because I think they can play guard, and the Dolphins have much more of a need at guard than tackle. I think Simmons and Connerly are both actually pretty good players. I like their film from what I've seen. They're both like good athletes. Simmons towards ACL though, so that's a question mark. But I think they're both tackles. Like they're for sure should play tackle at the next level. But yeah. Who won over 20 million? Holland? I think he was talking about Trey Smith, but also I do think Holland will be trying to get like 20 million. Why not just draft O-line first round? Because I think Banks and Campbell, the guys that I think would be worthy of the pick at 13 could be gone, are actually pretty likely to be gone. I think it's a poor draft strategy personally when you force yourself to like make a pick at a certain position. I think that's how you kind of get a lot of guys end up getting themselves fired when they forced a pick at it like at a certain position when they could have taken a stud. You know, what if you took the guy that is like, oh, we end up taking this offensive lineman who didn't work out just because he needed an offensive lineman, and then the guy that ended up being an all-pro at another position like linebacker or safety or tight end, we passed on just because Even though we had him graded higher, we passed on them just because it wasn't the position we needed the most. That's why in free agency, you try to fill as many of those needs as possible. So when you get to the draft, because all of this could change. Like your needs, your big need could be completely different by the time the draft rolls around, because free agency changes that. You really want to go into the draft with as many like options as possible. Yeah, just taking O-line in the first round gets you AJ. That's true. That's what the Dolphins did. And there's better picks on the board than Austin Jackson. And it's obviously Austin Jackson has worked out better as the years have gone on. But there are still definitely better picks to make. Tevin Jenkins. Yeah, I saw someone mention Tevin Jenkins. That's not a bad option on free agency either at guard. Genty, yeah. I mean, I haven't mentioned Genty name because I don't think the Dolphins will take him, but he is a top like 5 player in this class. So if he is at 13, like it's something you have to at least discuss. Even though running back is not the biggest need. To be fair, Dolphins struggled to run the ball. They were really bad at running the ball. If they were able to get the O-line semi-fixed in free agency and they drafted Genty to be like your workhorse and then moved Achane to receiver, I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. It wouldn't be my top choice, but it's something to at least discuss. Best tight end in the draft, I have Tyler Warren, but the tight end class is really legit. Like, there's a lot of good guys. After that, you have like Harold Fanning Jr., Gunnar Helm, Colston Loveland, Mason Taylor. Lots of good names to consider. I'll go to this list. We'll go to tight ends. Yep, all the guys I mentioned. Jackson Haas from Georgia Tech, good blocker. You have Gadsden, Terrence Ferguson, Jake Briningstool from Clemson. He's more of a receiver guy. You got Luke Leachy from Iowa, Oscar Delp from Georgia. Just a lot of names there to work with. I like the tight end class a lot. We could get Warren and then focus. Yeah, I mean, you could go Warren first round and then O-line. Say you got one of the guards I just mentioned in free agency, so you had that. So one of your guard spots is taken care of. You already have your 2 tackles in center taken care of, at least starter-wise. Then in the first round, you took Tyler Warren. That would get rid of your wide tight end need. And then in the second round, you took one of the guards we talked earlier about, like Wyatt Millum. Then you would have all 5 of your starters taken care of, and then you would have your wide tight end. And then that would completely transform your run blocking, at least. Like, your run blocking would improve so much compared to this last year. And I think that was, in my opinion, the biggest problem with the Dolphins' offenses last season was their ability to run the ball and run block consistently. And that had to do with the guards and their tight ends. Also, maybe some improvement at running back could help in certain areas, I think, from a physical perspective. But if you have good blocking, like Achane and Jalen Wright, I think going into next year can obviously take advantage and make some big plays if their blocking is much improved. Do you favor a mid-round pick for backup QB or address that in free agency? I would address backup QB in free agency first. And so I don't need to force a QB in the draft to be my backup. But if one ends up falling to me, then take that to be like your third guy, and then potentially your backup of the future, or even potentially your franchise if that's how strongly you feel about him down the line. But I just don't see that in this class. So I would definitely prioritize veteran free agency, and then also take one on day 3 somewhere. Ooh. Let's see. Would be nice to help out Walker. Walker? Are you talking about Brooks? I don't mind. Linebacker is another need too. There's some names in this class, like we haven't talked about Jahad Campbell. There's a UCLA linebacker named Carson Schweisinger that just got invited to the Senior Bowl. Apparently, he's really good. I watched one of his games, and he's a very good athlete, very good range, fluid. Danny Stitzman from Oklahoma. There's some good linebackers. I wouldn't take any at 13 personally. I don't think any of them are worth it. But there's some day 2 options. I also wouldn't mind if linebacker was one of the positions they decided to go after in free agency. Like if they could find someone like on a Jordan, like they got Jordan Brooks for a pretty cheap contract. What was it, like $7 million a year, 3 years contract? If they find another player to that level, and I can't remember who the free agent linebackers are off the top of my head, but I remember there being some names that I liked. But it depends. I think linebacker is one of the positions I think that depends on how free agency plays out for sure. Who's a good QB that we can get later that you like? I haven't watched a ton of QBs, but I've just said Dylan Gabriel, the Oregon quarterback, I think will be, to me, he's like a career backup that would fit the Dolphins' needs pretty decently. He's marked to go 24th. Who? Are you talking about the Minnesota guy? I don't really like Ursery for the Dolphins as a fit that much. I take Judkins. I like both Ohio State running backs. I just think running backs, running back is a position I would be more on later. Tua, we're not talking about Tua. Honestly, I'm done with people's opinions on Tua, to be honest. We're talking draft. Okay. It all starts with running the rock and stopping the run. Yeah, and the Dolphins were good at stopping the run this year. They just were not good at running the ball at all. What's Cater's contract situation? I mean, Cater is he's an exclusive rights free agent. So, like, I'm pretty sure they can get him back pretty easily. I think someone would have to, like, match his or something like that. And you wouldn't have to give him, like, crazy money if they wanted to get Kohu back. There are some free agent safeties. I know there's Jeremy Chin from Washington, Julian Blackman from Indianapolis. At least guys that are like relatively on the younger side and that wouldn't be super expensive, that I think could be like serviceable level starters. But I would like to get like one high end safety and then the other safety to be like at least serviceable. Warren changes the team more than any other player. Honestly, I might agree. Like, I think he might have the biggest impact, at least quickly. What about Cameron Williams? Is that the Texas right tackle? He's another guy that I think could be like day 2, potentially move to guard, physical guy. You think Dolphins keep Chubb? Chubb's a tough one. It feels like Chubb is like, he's like, if you look at the contracts that the Dolphins have, Chubb is like the one contract that is like the most movable for them to like actually save a lot of money. So I think it depends how much, if Chubb wants to restructure or not. But also it feels like Chubb is one of the leaders of the team that actually like players respect. And it feels like that sort of culture is needed for the Dolphins. Plus, if you got rid of Chubb, edge would become a need, but like, I guess you wouldn't need like, if you have Phillips and Chop, you don't need like a super high-end starter edge with them. You just need like a guy that's good in third and rotation. I think it just depends if he's willing to restructure or not. If not, they probably cut him. I think McMorris can be safety 3. I also think that's a possibility too. I also wouldn't mind bringing back Elijah Campbell for special teams, and I still think Elijah Campbell should have played the season over what the Dolphins had, at least over Poyer. To his average AF, okay. You haven't broken anything to me. Trade for Justin Fields? For what? To be backup? I mean, I guess. I mean, he'd be a horrible system fit. I mean, he'd obviously be more talented what the Dolphins have. It's just, I just don't see him fitting in the system. He'd be fun as like a Taysom Hill type, I guess. I think Armstead may retire. I agree. I think it's time to move on from Armstead anyways. Armstead's a great player, don't get me wrong. He was one of the best players. When he's on the field, he's one of the best players for the Dolphins. It's just he's older, and I think O-line is one of those positions where like you really need to have like consistency because like these guys need to build like a chemistry together. I think it was hard to build that chemistry when Armstead was like going in and out of the games nearly every single game, you know? Joshua Dobbs, yeah. Dobbs could be an option too. I keep Paul and Jackson can get the job done in this system. If the Dolphins were in another system where it was like, oh, we need to play like a true passing, like if they like were dropping back and playing like true pass sets, the Dolphins would be in trouble at tackle because they're not the best true pass setters. But if you can play where like they can jump set people, they can get into people quickly. You could use play action, RPOs, screen to slow down pass rushes. Those guys have the athleticism and physicality as run blockers to fit in your system, and you can get away with the pass protection stuff. That's why the Dolphins don't typically have that many like sacks given up and stuff like that, just because of what McDaniel does and Tua's quick release. Malik, yeah, I agree with that. I love Malik Washington, big fan. I mean, if they brought Justin Fields in to be backup, yeah. But like, I mean, he's not. If you're talking about him being a starter, then no. I mean, he wouldn't start over Tua. But I also just don't like the scheme fit that he would be. Like, I don't dislike Fields or anything. I just don't love him as a scheme fit. That's like the problem is it's hard to be a scheme fit in this system. It's a tough system to play in. I think some people don't realize that. Requires a very specific skill set, and it's hard to even find starters at those spots. How do you feel about Craycraft going forward? Craycraft is a free agent, I believe, and I wouldn't mind bringing him back. Like, he's not a bad like depth receiver to have, but like I wouldn't be surprised if they just move on from him. As I've talked about, the decent chance they trade Tyreek. Waddle then becomes like the replacement for Tyreek. I think Malik Washington. I love Malik Washington. I've talked about it. He was my favorite, like one of my favorite players in the draft last year, even before the Dolphins drafted him. But to me, I wouldn't rely on I don't think you can rely on Malik Washington to be a receiver too. To me, Malik Washington is a slot guy, so the Dolphins would then need to, I think, get a bigger body on the outside. You have Jonnu Smith, who can also play as like a slot receiver. You have Achane, who can even play as a receiver for you too. But like, you need someone that can be like a bigger body outside number 2 for you. That would become a need, and I think outside of that, receiver wouldn't be too big of a need. You would just need bodies at like as depth, and I think you can find that in the draft. Yeah, Taj. I was going to mention Taj. He's a guy that I could see coming back for next year and being like a nice depth for them as well. But he's also like a slot receiver too, like a smaller slot guy. T. Higgins. I mean, T. Higgins obviously is great and would be kind of what the Dolphins need, but he's going to be too expensive. Mick, yeah, I like Andrew. I still need to learn how to say his last name. Mukiba, the Texas safety. He's would be like a really good like round 3 pick. Very smart player, very good instincts, closing speed. I believe he has the close. He had the game-winning interception in the previous game. I really like the Texas secondary. I've talked about it. I like Barron a lot. Mukiba has some really impressive tape. I'm probably gonna do a film breakdown on him pretty soon, so like I'll go into depth in him more later on. But yeah, I do like him a lot. I like the safety class from what I've seen so far. I like Starks. I like Watts. I like him. Is there any other safeties that I really like that I've watched so far? Or some? I still need to watch more of the safeties. I don't have film on everyone yet, so it's tough to get to everyone. But those are kind of like the bigger names. Actually, Winston Jr., he hasn't really played. I think he got hurt at the start of the season from Penn State. He's another player that's good, though. Lathan Ransom from Ohio State. Nick Emanawari from South Carolina. Those are some potential day 2 names to at least know. But I really like Starks, Watts, Mukiba. Barron if he were to play safety, but I think he's a nickel corner. Is this system holding us back? In certain ways, sure, but like, I think one of the biggest reasons I don't think if the Dolphins made a change at head coach, this year specifically, I think they'd actually be like much worse off because their players, I think, would struggle to fit. A lot of the players would struggle to fit in like other systems. Like the O-line would look even worse in other systems. It actually probably helps them out the most. It helps out the O-linemen. I guess it would depend what system would come in to replace it, but it actually is probably helping us out. And the Dolphins don't have the resources this year to completely flip it around and, for a new coach. I'm going to read it, but I think we talked about everyone I want to talk about. Yeah, South Carolina Nick, Bruce O'Donnell wanted to come lost, but it is his stats with this one. Andy Dalton? I mean, yeah, maybe. Darnold will not play as a backup. He'll go so he's going to be a starter somewhere. Minshew, Flacco. I mean, yeah, those are names. I just like the reason I haven't put yes, those guys would be better than what the Dolphins have, but I still feel like it wouldn't make that much of a difference. You have to get an absolute stud. Dolphins should get Xavier Watts in the draft from Notre Dame. Check him out, elite safety. Yeah, I've talked about Xavier Watts a lot this stream. But yeah, I love Xavier Watts. Cousins, another potential fit, especially if you got him for cheap. It's just he would have to get healthier. He looked washed. Maybe 2 years off the Achilles would be good for him. But I guess he'd probably be better than most backups you could get. But he'd have to be really cheap. McDaniel's bad at giving players a chance, right? Kamara, McMorris, for example, he gets locked down. I think it's hurting us. Discuss. To an extent, I agree. I don't know if it's all on McDaniel thing. It's tough to say when you're not in the room because all those. I mean, except for McMorris, Kamara and Wright did get chances. I think Wright did get chances, but every time he touched the ball, he got hit immediately. He had negative yards per carry to end the season. And I understand from McDaniel's perspective, he's I'm just wasting plays giving him touches, and it's not Wright's fault. It was the O-line's fault at times, and it was the tight end's fault at times. No one was blocking up front. It didn't really matter who was in at running back. Kamara, he played, but didn't play enough to really have a chance to do anything, and his plays didn't make much of an impact. And all the other edges that kind of played better than him, except for I think he should have played over. I forget his name. He was on the team for a little bit, but then left. What's his name? I can't remember his name, but whatever. And then McMorris, I think, definitely should have gotten a chance. But I guess I'm not in the room, so it's tough to say. Maybe they weren't up to speed as much as I thought. I would take Watts. But I mean, I guess the conversation is if Watts was in the second and Mukiba was in the third, what would you rather do? Then that becomes tougher. I guess it would just depend what the other option would be. If you told me in the second that I would get a starting level guard, then I would probably go with that and then get Mukiba in the third. Because you probably wouldn't be able to get most likely not a starting level guard in the third. What am I missing? Who's the best fit for us at edge realistically? Probably someone that could replace. Honestly, he's not my favorite player, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Dolphins really Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, because the Dolphins need more of a strong side edge, and Stewart's really huge. That guy is a big body defensive end, and he moves really well for his size, and he makes some big splash impact plays. He just plays far too inconsistent right now. I think he really needs to develop, but he has all the physical traits in the book. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the guy they see and they're oh, he could complement Chop, because him and Chop are very different, size-wise, but they both are very athletic. just in like different ways. Let me see if there's any other. I mean, I really like Mike Green from Marshall. I don't know if he's the best fit, but that guy's an absolute stud. Abdul Carter's edge one. I feel like the Dolphins will be looking to more add someone that like, you know what like Emmanuel Ogbah did for the Dolphins this season? They're trying to maybe upgrade that. So like they're looking for like a bigger body guy that can work on twists and stunts, and I think that would be a guy like Stewart, even though he's not my favorite. But I do like I don't hate like I definitely like I see some people that like really don't like Stewart, like they think he's like a 4th round pick, and I'm like, no, I mean he's got way too many traits to go that late. Like but I do like him. But sometimes with the traits guys, I like to go floor first. Yeah, Carter is a chop like Abdul Carter. Carter's very good. Carter is like gives me like Parsons vibes, all from Clemson, all from Penn State. Yeah, I saw that the Tyreek Hill didn't ask for a trade, so it's not a guarantee, but it's definitely. I think it's still a decent chance he gets traded just because of the things he said, and he held himself out, you know? Obviously one of the best receivers in the NFL, but like it wasn't like Tyreek was ever my favorite player to root for, you know? Like scored. The other Texas A&M guy, yeah, similar to Stewart, another bigger body guy that might even play more as like a 3-4 defensive end, hand in the dirt, like a 5 tech almost. Scorden was better last year, his film wise, because I think he put on some weight this year that kind of hurt him. So I think if he lost some weight, that would be a good thing for him. Yeah, I think it was the Titans who requested to interview McKenzie. Yeah, going for a little bit here. Pretty fun day. I love the draft season, and there's way more people in here during the draft time than the actual season, which I love. That's funny. But yeah, we're gonna continue talking about in like future stuff. I'm gonna continue doing some film breakdowns. I got some things lined up for guys coming out next. Maybe next time we'll talk more about maybe day 2 targets, or we'll go into like position specific. Like we might just break down a bunch of positions once I get through, because I've watched a lot of the first round players. I'm still working my way through looking for film on guys. Like I've barely watched like any quarterbacks or running backs, so maybe I'll watch some of them soon and we could talk about. But I really want to get through like tight ends, offensive linemen, D-line, safety, like a lot of the positions that I feel like are more bigger needs for the Dolphins. I want to get through first, so we can really focus on those. So we can maybe find some sleepers. I'm trying to find some guys that are under the radar that maybe you can find later on. Love draft season though. What coaching or front move can you see happening compared to what you want to happen? I don't know. I don't see that much changing. I think special teams coach could change. I guess it would depend if people left or not. I don't know if Mike's going to change like offensive coordinator or anything like that. I don't know. I see it staying relatively the same. See Ether Bonner stepping up next year? I hope so. I think Bonner will stick around. I don't think they cut him. Apparently, I remember in the offseason, Greer said like teams offered a pick for Bonner. So I think they clearly like Bonner. Personally, I would have liked to see Bonner play this season. He was one where I thought he should have been playing over Duck. Like both obviously undrafted guys, but I just think slightly, I like both of them, but I just think slightly more of Bonner than Duck. What do you think about trading up for Ashton Jeanty? I would not trade up for Ashton Jeanty. Yeah, I love draft season. Love talking about it. Um, yeah, I mean, definitely. I think the offense needs to find a blend between 2022 and 2023 and this most previous season. They need to be able to. I think the reason the offense fell off this year is really the running game. They couldn't run the ball, and that forced them to like. And since they couldn't run the ball and teams could still play too high, they couldn't push the ball down the field because they had no running game to set things up. They couldn't use play action to push things down the field because a lot of their big plays in the previous seasons had been off play action. And with no running game, those plays became less likely. And then to make an extension of the running games, they started running more screens, which also then hurt your average depth of target. So I think they need to find a nice blend. I think adding Jonnu helped a lot with the intermediate stuff. I think if they could do what they did in 2023, but then having Jonnu here to be that like intermediate threat, because in 2023, I think Tua was where he struggled was getting to his check down. And in this most previous season, we were forced to check it down so much because of how defense played us. If they can find that balance to be like, oh, we're still trying to throw the ball down the field, and we take it when we have it, but if there's the checkdowns there, now you have Jonnu to take advantage. They need to find like that mix, and I think if it comes to running the ball, for sure. Have you started doing mock drafts on the various mock draft simulators? Not yet. We'll definitely do some mock draft streams, but I'm waiting to do like more film on players because sometimes once you get to like round 3, then I'm like, oh, it's not like I've watched everyone there, so I want to like be able to watch more people so I have a better feel for the mock draft stuff. Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that, Matt. If Campbell was at 13, I still think he's probably gone, but like, yeah, I would slide him into guard. Yeah, Rizzy. I don't know if Rizzy would come back. But yeah. I just feel like he probably would get. I mean, yeah, he'd probably get a special team job. I would like Rizzy, and then yeah, Sala if Weaver did get hired somewhere else, that could easily happen. I could see the Sala thing happening very easily if Weaver left. Honestly, I didn't even watch the end of the season presser. I saw people talking about it. I saw some clips, but I was just like, honestly, I've never cared for the pressers. Like either way, like if it was positive, negative, like I don't really put too much stock into what anyone's saying. I just want to see what they do. Tyreek had a torn ligament in his wrist. He could have quit a long time ago. Reek wants to win. Yeah, but it's the way he handled it in the game. Like, if he told the coaches, like, "Hey, the season's over now. Like, I don't want to like risk that re-injury or whatever," and the coaches agreed to it, then sure. But like, he just completely pulled himself out of the game without even like notifying the coaches of anything. And I think that's a big negative for sure. Like if the coaches were like, "Yeah, it's time to play out. We don't want to risk you getting injured," then that's a different story. But like, I don't know. I think it's definitely not the culture you want to build there. Oh God, I would not want to. I would not want Rex Ryan in Miami. It would be horrible too. Didn't Rex Ryan talk shit about McDaniel on ESPN? I'm pretty sure he did. Denver was up 30-0. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it definitely was over, but in my opinion, it's still soft. I don't know. I feel like if you're a true competitor, you stay in the game. Unless your coaches pull you. Okay, but yeah. Any more questions? Any more draft related question? Rex Ryan hasn't coached in like how many years? There's a reason that guy's on the desk. You need a legit one tech. Yeah, there's some good one techs in this class. You said Walker, Tyleek Williams from Ohio State, Kenneth Grant from Michigan, Alfred Collins from Texas. Those are some good names. If you want, like, it depends. I think D tackles. Yeah, what I talked about, one of those positions where depends how free agency plays out. I think for me with the draft, because I think it's one of those positions where you could re-sign a lot of the players you had recently, and then you don't have to force that position in the draft. If the best player available is D tackle, you take it, but not when you necessarily need to force. But we'll see how the free agency plays out. Which safety you would pick up with the first? I think Malachi Starks is the only safety I would take in the first round. I really like Xavier Watts in the second. Then like Andrew Mukiba, Texas safety in the third. But I think out of the first round safeties, I think Starks is the only one that I would take. And I have Starks as like a top 5 player in the class. Hit those legs. Okay. Can we get a second round pick for Tyreek? I think that's at the most what you would get. But I've been guessing that it's going to be like a third-ish. Or like the value of a third. Or maybe more like a third and a fifth or something. Maybe you get a second if you're lucky. But I think contract-wise is what's going to keep you from getting anything more than that. A second and Higgins back. I still wouldn't have. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like cutting Higgins was that bad, but like I still never would have cut him. Any particular person you'll be watching? Yeah, Tyler Warren, Penn State tight end, one of my favorite options at 13. Xavier Watts, Notre Dame safety, one of my favorite options at in the second round. If he's there, he might even be gone. Some other players, obviously Abdul Carter, top edge for Penn State. Those are probably the biggest names. I'm trying to think who else I'll be watching in that game. No, a lot of the other good players that are going to get drafted are actually out. I know Benjamin Morrison's been out. Kevin Winston's been out for Penn State. Those are like the big names to definitely watch out for. I'm going to be watching Warren versus Watts. I hope they get matched up a couple of times in coverage because tight end for safety that ends up happening. That'll be fun. We wouldn't take Luther Burden if he fell to us. I think they would. I think it depends who's there. I think he would be in consideration at 13. But he wouldn't be my top choice personally. I like Burden, but there's other prospects I like more, I think. That will also potentially be there. Cornerback Benjamin Morrison, Notre Dame. Yeah, he's a quality prospect too, but he is not playing because he's been out since like week 5 or something with an injury. I forget what his injury was, but he's had an injury. You have an NFL comp for Watts. Ooh. Watts is tough. I'm trying to think for Watts. Because he plays a lot of free safety for Notre Dame, and he's like the free safety, ball hawking type. I'd have to look into it. I haven't he's not Buda Baker. Like he has some Buda Baker to his game, but he's better in like deep coverage than Baker was. And Buda Baker was like one of my favorite safety prospects ever coming out of Washington. That was like my guy. I don't know. I like Watts. He's a ball hawking free safety, very instinctive, like makes plays down. Like there was a play he made last week where they ran like a reverse and he was playing as the like middle field closed free safety and he made the tackle behind the line of scrimmage. Jeremy Chin, no, I think Chin's more of a box safety than Watts is. I think Watts has more deep playmaking ability. How do you think we get more cap space? I mean, they'll either restructure or move on from a lot of those contracts. Like they'll probably like restructure Tua, restructure or / cut Chubb as like a post June 1st. Probably restructure like a Ramsey. A lot of the bigger contracts that they could work on, maybe even like Waddle. Those would create cap space, but like that could potentially even make things worse down the line. And then like move on from people like Durham Smythe, the Mostert, those types of contracts. But those wouldn't get like big money. Yeah. I forget what all of them are, but yeah, you probably know them all. Wow. Okay, I'm back, I think. Can you guys hear me? I think my stream disconnected for a second. We good there? Good to go? Okay, cool. Yeah, who are Eric, who are your favorite like O-line guys in this class, or have you watched too many of them? I think I saw you mention Banks on Twitter, and we talked about Banks earlier. Because Banks would be one of my favorite O-line options at 13. Because I don't love a lot of the top tier O-linemen in this class as first round picks. Okay. Yeah, okay, so yeah, so damn, I had a good we didn't lag at all stream until at least I was about to end stream anyway, where it actually started lagging. So yeah, it looks like we're dropping. But yeah, since it looks like my stream is dropping, I'm gonna end it. So thank you guys for watching. We'll continue doing these down the line, but I keep dropping frames really bad, so